Hi everyone, it's Dr. Nicole Avena. Hope everybody's doing well. Happy Tuesday. Week's almost halfway done. So I'm really excited that we're going to be having a conversation today with Dr. Jessica. And I think you're going to really love talking with her. We're going to be talking all about stress. And I think that stress is something that literally everybody is impacted by in some way, shape, or form. And so she's a chiropractor. She is going to be talking with us about all the different ways in which stress can have an impact on our health. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we can do to make sure that we're actually doing things to make sure that we're managing our stress. And if we're overwhelmed with stress, what can we do to make sure that we don't let it get the best of us? And so excited to be here. And so we're just waiting for her to join, and I'm sure she'll be here any second. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about stress or anything that you want to hear about, definitely drop them in the comments. We're going to be taking some questions and answers. And I think it's really just so great to have so many people joining us. And one of the things that I feel like about stress that personally for me, has kind of been a challenge is a little bit of the kind of re-managing things now that we're kind of entering into society in some degree, that the pandemic is changing its trajectory and things are changing a lot. And so how people are kind of reintroducing this like new level of stress of things opening up and the kids' activities picking up and all these different things going on at the same time is really just something that I feel like a lot of people have been struggling with. I've been getting a lot of questions about that. So let me see if I can find Dr. Jessica. She is not showing up on my list here. So let me see if I can add her. Let's see. All right, let me see if I can add her. And then we should be good to go. Here we go. All right. Okay, so hoping that she'll be here in one sec. And so one of the things, oh, there she is.
Hey.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Jessica?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. So I was just telling everybody on the live that I'm so excited to be chatting with you today. We're going to be talking about stress, and I feel like you're the perfect person to have this live with, because as a chiropractor, I'm sure you get people coming to you all the time with just stress manifesting in their body, like coming out of their skin almost. And so I'm really excited that we're going to chat today. Just a quick intro. So we're having Dr. Jessica Duncan-Propes with us today. She is fabulous. You've probably seen a lot about her on our Instagram before because we work with her a lot here at Brain MD. Oh, and she's got a cute little baby.
Yeah, I've got her running around, so.
That's awesome. I love it. I love her pigtails.
Thank you.
So Dr. Jessica, before we get into it and take some questions from our viewers, can you just share a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, just for those who are kind of new or aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, of course. My name is Dr. Jess. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, where my practice is. So I have a chiropractic practice, and I take care of athletes, older population, babies, kids, anyone really. So we've got kind of a family practice, and we do treat symptoms, but we're really moving in like the wellness based direction. So, really getting to people and kind of getting them in the mode of preventing illness.
Yeah, that's so important, because I feel like probably by the time they get to you, they're already at the point where, their stress and whatever's happening has kind of manifested as some sort of pain or injury, and that's something we want to try to avoid, obviously.
Yes.
And so what do you think, I mean, just as a chiropractor, I'm just curious, what are the things that, bring people to you in terms of stress? Like, what are the common themes that you tend to see?
One of the things I see, all day long, every day, is tension and just that overwhelming feeling of muscle tightness thank you, Dakota, in the neck and the upper back. And I've really found that like work stress really manifests like up in this region. And it's just that overwhelming feeling. People will describe it like they need to they need to stretch, or like they just can't work a knot out. And I'm sure that a lot of it has to do with sitting and working at a computer, but I really do think that type of stress, like it manifests up in this area.
And so what could happen if people let that happen chronically? Like if they don't address that or reverse it, what can happen long term?
So a lot of things. I mean, a lot of things can happen, physiologically with your musculoskeletal system. The constant tightness, it's going to throw your posture out of alignment, it leads to degeneration. But also when you're, constantly in pain and you're constantly overwhelmed, your body is constantly in fight or flight, like sympathetic overload. And that's just going to lead to hormone imbalance, terrible sleep, chronic fatigue. It's just kind of a cascade of events.
Yeah, it's amazing how, everything is so interconnected by, kind of channeling that stress. And I feel like probably, we all channel our stress in different ways. I think, some people, they freak out and they, have a moment and they, channel it that way. But as other people like hold it within, and if sometimes it can manifest where you're holding it in your chest and your back, like you said, that's not really a great way to deal with it, because then you see that there are these long-term health consequences that can come about. So it's interesting how, dealing with stress, I feel like, is really the best thing you can do. And so what do you advise to your patients? Like if you have patients coming to you with, chronic stress, what do you tell them?
I tell them that I'm going to do what I can for them, in the 20 or 30 minutes that we have in the office. So a lot of, musculoskeletal work, alignment, tension release. We actually have some emotional techniques that we can use to try and stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system to kind of get that relax, rest and digest, pattern going. But I also like to talk to them a lot about their home life, just get a little idea of what's going on. Like, did you just get a new job? Are you stressed about finances? Like, are you having relationship issues? Just so I kind of know what they're coming into my office from, and maybe I can give them some pointers like, hey, take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, like go outside, walk around the cul-de-sac, get a glass of water, do some stretches, just some grounding exercises.
Yeah, those are all great ideas. We had one viewer asking, do you have a special type of diet, or in terms of nutrition, is there anything that you recommend to help people like to manage stress?
The first thing I recommend is to stay hydrated. So that is, that's the number one thing I tell people. I probably repeat it 55 times a day. If you're dehydrated, that's just going to kind of throw you into overdrive. But, really what you could do if you were interested in that is, keep a food journal and, write down foods that you're eating throughout the day and how you feel like 30 minutes or an hour after you eat them. And, these inflammatory foods, like a lot of people, dairy, sugar, gluten, those things, just try to cut them out as much as possible. Don't stress yourself out, overcut, but, just be mindful.
Yeah, so that's a great idea. And, I think one thing that can also help with, which is something that, is related, is that it's often the case that people kind of self-medicate their stress with food by eating foods that maybe aren't so healthy. And so, if you're having a bad day at work, or you get in an argument with a coworker or a friend or something like that, people might turn to food to kind of make them feel better. And that can cause a whole cascade of events happening inside of our body. That really isn't going to necessarily make the stress any better. It might feel like it is a Band-Aid for whatever issues happening at the moment, but over time, that's actually just going to contribute to the problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why I, say, take a breather, grab some water, step outside. If you work in an office, it's, not really, you can't just, go outside. But if you work from home, take a little walk, schedule a standing break, just kind of detach yourself from whatever that immediate stress is that's causing you all those emotions.
Yeah. So we had somebody asking, what can you do in the moment? Like, obviously, let's just say you're in a meeting at work and you're getting grilled and you don't know the answers and you're just under all the stress and you can't go take a walk or, really leave the room.
Yeah.
Do you have any like tips on mantras or things that people can just do or tell themselves when they maybe need to kind of do it on the sly or do something that they could just kind of, get control?
Yeah, I honestly, I do like breathing exercises. And if, if I can really concentrate on taking deep breaths, like if I'm alone, that's great. But if I'm, let's say, in a meeting or with a patient or, whatever, just I try to take 3 breaths, think about what's being said to me and gather my thoughts before I respond. If it's someone that's, maybe we're disagreeing, I try to, think what is making them feel this way? Like, is it my body language? Maybe I can just, take a couple breaths and reset.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Really good. I'm wondering now, one of the things that often comes up, a question that I get a lot is, what can we do about cortisol? And so maybe we could just like talk for a few minutes about cortisol, because I think a lot of people aren't exactly sure what cortisol is and, don't really understand that we need cortisol to survive. It's part of our, ways in which our bodies can function, and it naturally fluctuates throughout the day depending on, the time of day and, so could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that people are interested in learning more about cortisol and how that plays a role in our stress response.
Really, it's like when you're in that constant, and you might not even realize, like, you might not even feel stressed by something external at the moment. But, so many people that I talk to are running on 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and it's interrupted sleep, blue light, noises, pets, kids. And, the first thing they reach for in the morning is caffeine. It's not water. They're not eating, a solid breakfast with protein, and they're not fueling their body. So really, it's like you can't even, your hormones are just kind of hanging on for dear life. And that's when your body starts overproducing, the bad hormones, I suppose. So, what I really try to focus on with my patients is, taking little steps, but just improving your routines. Try to go to bed 20 minutes earlier, get some water first thing in the morning, have, an easy breakfast that you can prep, but it's going to set you up, for success for the day. Maybe pick 3 days a week that you're going to exercise, just kind of get your body into a routine.
Yeah.
Your hormones can hop on that routine as well. Cause I feel like in our day and age, like everyone is just all over the place all the time.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. And, the thing about hormones, and especially our stress hormones, is that they're impacted by so many different things. And so, it can be overwhelming if you're like, okay, I want to, get on top of this and, take care of my stress. I mean, it's really a multifaceted approach. It's about making sure you're getting enough sleep. It's about making sure that you're also properly appraising your stressors, because I think that's something that I hear a lot of people who talk about how, they're stressed, but remember, we have stressors and then we have our reaction to those stressors. And so our reaction is actually the thing that's going to spike our cortisol levels and, cause us to have this chronic stress. And so it's so important to be able to kind of take a step back and, look at these stressors and evaluate them and really kind of sit with them for a minute before you have that reaction. And I think that's a tool that can really be beneficial. It's not exactly easy at first, but when you start to become more mindful of it, I think it really can help people to minimize their feelings of stress.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. This is actually a conversation I have with my husband a lot, because he works in corporate. So we work in two separate environments, and it's hard for me to understand where he's coming from sometimes. But I just, if he's got like deadlines or meetings or, a superior is really pressuring him for something, I'm like, look, nobody's life is on the line. Like, your health isn't on the line. Like, we're good, you're good, just communicate, tell them you're feeling overwhelmed. You need an extra, 2 days, 20 minutes, whatever, to complete this task, and just kind of like take a step back.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy to get caught up in, deadlines and alarms and calendars and everything. But really, it's like, when you think about it, I would hope for the most part that, your boss isn't going to get upset if you just say, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need an extra 30 minutes, before this project is due.
Right, exactly. And I feel like the whole idea behind deadlines, like, yeah, obviously there are some things that have, firm deadlines where it's absolutely needed by a certain point. But I feel like a lot of times when deadlines are assigned to different projects, it's just an agreed upon date at which this thing is going to get done or moved on to the next step in the process. And so I think that, if we hear a deadline, or especially if we're getting it from a supervisor, we tend to think, oh
Mm-hmm.
my goodness, it has to be done by this point. But I really think I've started to look at deadlines as guidelines about when it's
Yeah.
supposed to be done. So, if, hey, I'm going to do a really cruddy job on this, I can get it to you by that deadline. But if you
Right.
want the best work from me, I'm going to need a few more days.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something to, consider, even with, even with people who are in different types of jobs where there's always going to be deadlines, right? And even with people who, are thinking about family related things, projects with the kids' school, or different
Yep.
events that you're trying to plan, there's always going to be a deadline. So it's, I think, really a matter of kind of adjusting to have it fit within your life so it's not causing you stress.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think with, a key thing in that aspect is just communication. Like, I think if we just communicate more about, hey, this is really, this is stressing me out, this is overwhelming me, like, can I have help with this, or, with some extra time, or, I think that would solve a lot of the issues. I think we've gotten to a point where, everyone just holds themselves to such a high standard, and, you might not want to ask for help because, what is your boss going to think about that? And, we just, kind of, we're all human.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I really think a lot of the stress that people experience is because we're trying to be superhuman. We're trying to take on too much. And
Absolutely.
it comes from a place of, I think, wanting to be helpful, wanting to do a good job, wanting to get maybe that external validation that, yeah, you're doing great and you did such good work and you're juggling it all. But
Yep.
I think, we need to kind of self-reflect on that a bit and think about how over time that might not be sustainable. And that's when people get burnt out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you get people coming to your practice that have kind of hit that like rock bottom, like I've had like it up to my eyeballs with stress? Have you had, can you talk a little bit about that? Is that something that you've experienced in your professional work?
Yeah, I have, especially over the last 2 years, which have been incredibly stressful on people in different ways. I've had people, and it's usually I just, I start my conversation with them like, hey, how are you feeling today? Is there anything that needs attention? Are you just here for wellness? And it's like they get that first word out and tears start flowing, and they're just like, I don't know, like, I'm not okay. And they just kind of, I don't know, it's like they get into a space where they feel like comfortable, I suppose, letting everything go. And that's when, I just sit there and listen and then do what I can with, muscle work, alignment, emotional techniques. But it's interesting to see when you do come in contact with a person who's just bottled it up so much, and they just like, they cannot keep it in any longer.
Yeah, that's, I think that's why it's wonderful that there are people like you out there that can, help individuals who get to that point. Because I think a lot of times people find that if they vent their stress or talk about their stressors, they kind of come off as complaining. And so that might be kind of a barrier to, having that discussion with your partner, or maybe, coworkers or friends or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think, having a, kind of quote unquote stranger to be able to lay it all out to can be really cathartic, and it can help people to then, like you said, get it off their chest so they're not bottling it up, and then kind of think about it, and then maybe start anew and, figure out what they can maybe modify or adjust in either their mindset or their day-to-day life to make it just more manageable, more enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, I really I'm a huge proponent of therapy, journaling. Sometimes it's hard, you want to talk to your best friend or your significant other, but just human nature is to compare stories. So it's, I'm talking to my spouse at night about how terrible my day was, and then he might tell me how terrible his day was, and I feel like I didn't even really get what I wanted to say off my chest. So, having a third party to talk to, or writing it down, just getting it out. Like, I don't know, sometimes when something's really bothering me and it's work related or whatever, I type up an email and then I read it and delete it.
Yeah.
By the time I've typed it out and I read it, I realize it sounds ridiculous and I'm over it. But I got my system.
That's such a great idea. I think I might try to use that. That's really a great way, to get it off your chest. But it's also, about putting this time space between,
Mm-hmm.
how you feel and then, allowing appraisal, right? You're giving
Yeah.
yourself time to appraise the stressor. And I think that's really the key, is being able to sit back, wait a minute, think about it, and think, oh boy, is this really something that I am, going to stress about? Like, is this something that's,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, causing, a major problem in life? Or is this something that I'm going to deal with? I just need to figure out the best way to do it, and maybe get a little bit of, help figuring out how to manage it.
Yeah, I'm all about that, taking the quiet breaths, just kind of taking a couple seconds to reassess the situation, because I feel like, 9 times out of 10, like it's something that I have misinterpreted, or, I'm feeling a certain way, something's bothering me, and I misunderstood, I took it the wrong way, maybe I'm being defensive. And so after I've, stepped back and reassessed the situation, I'm like, oh, okay, this is fine.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I know from my background in neuroscience is that, a large part of our stress response is actually associated with our previous memories and experiences. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have that amygdala emotion component, right, in our brain, but then we also have the hippocampus, which is the memory component. And so, those are big players in this stress response. And so we tend to draw upon our previous experiences. And sometimes that's why we misinterpret things as being stressors. So for instance, let's just say you were in a couple of bad relationships at some point in your
Mm-hmm.
life, and now you're in this new relationship and you maybe have a little bit of a disagreement. You're going to be drawing upon those past experiences where you had a very stressful time arguing with your significant other, whereas that's actually not applicable right now to this new partner you have. So I think that that's also, something to keep in mind when we're starting to get overwhelmed with stress, to think, boy, is this because it's really stressful, or because I've had an experience like this that's maybe making me kind of feel this way?
Yeah, that's like super interesting. Like how you just kind of, maybe not even, you're conscious of it, but you just revert back to how you felt in that situation. And again, like your defense is up, like your sympathetics are all stimulated, and you're
Yeah.
not thinking clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that whole fight or flight response, right? I mean, these are primitive areas of the brain, like that, animals, lower animals all have these. And it's really so that we can react immediately to get out of a danger.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the challenges that we face today is that we still have that primitive fight or flight stressor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but we're not like living in a world where, we're fighting animals or having to run away from a bear chasing us or something like that, like our ancestors did. We're fighting 100 emails in our inbox, and we're fighting, having to call your mom back. Like, so it's just a different type of stressor, but our brains are kind of looking at them as the same way.
Yeah.
And so it's really, I think, about kind of just keeping that in check and remembering that, there are things that we can do to make those changes in our behavior and our appraisal of the situation, so that we don't manifest the stress and end up having all this tension built up inside of us.
Absolutely. It's like our, I guess our primitive brain can't really discern from, like emotional stress or perceived stress and like an actual physical, like bear chasing stress.
Exactly. I mean, we are still, we're still living in that primitive brain, right? I mean, we have that in our genetics. That's just, we're born with it. And I think that it becomes one of those things where when we, have these day-to-day stressors that we have, we're still reverting back to that, primitive brain that thinks that it's being chased by an animal. And that's just not how it is today.
Exactly. It's a crazy thing.
It is. It really is. So Dr. Jessica, we have just a couple of minutes left, and then we're going to wrap things up. But I wanted to thank you so much for talking with us today. I feel like this information has been really helpful, and I've enjoyed talking with you. And I'm so glad we got to see your little one in those cute little pigtails. My kids are older now, so I have a 6-year-old and a 13-year-old, but I miss the little spiky pigtail days. So can you tell us a little bit about where people can learn more about you and connect with you if they're interested in, following up and learning more?
Yeah. So you can always hop on my Instagram page. I'm at Dr. Jessica Well Adjusted. And then I actually have a link tree in my bio that has my website and some other resources under there. Like I said, I'm in Atlanta, but, through Instagram, which is pretty cool. Like I talk to people all over the country. So Instagram is a good starting point to get a hold of me.
That's great. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. And if you want to learn more about me, I'm at Dr. Nicole Avena. And I really appreciated you taking the time today, Jessica. It's been great.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.